Yep. We are live. This is Emil Fisher with another episode of the BCTL podcast. Today with me, I have the legendary Erik Paulson. For anyone that doesn't know, Erik Paulson is one of the first American MMA fighters. Erik has been doing martial arts for longer than I've been alive, that's for sure. How are you doing today, Erik?
I'm doing great. Hey, that's how you know you're old when you get an introduction like that.
I don't know about old or experienced. I mean,
Say, oh, this guy's a legend, and then everyone goes, "Oh, he's old."
I think it's like when I think of you, and I don't mean this to kiss up. I mean just the reality. I feel like you're the 1% of the 1% in that you competed at the highest level, and now you're creating athletes that compete at the highest level. You know, you have your 1%ers, guys that, you know, compete at the highest level, and then you have the 1% of the 1%ers who then go on to do what you're doing with CSW. So tell me a little bit about your origins in martial arts. Like, how did you get started? How did you get started with, jiu-jitsu and with grappling and Shudo? Just a brief history so that we have something to go off of.
Okay. Well, my mother first started me in judo in 1974. Then I got into a street fight, and I knew I had to learn how to punch and kick, so I got into karate in 6th grade. In 8th grade, my dad said, "You need to do a sport that's great. Let's get you into boxing. That's a real sport." So I started boxing while I was in 8th grade. Became a gymnast, started gymnastics at the beginning of 8th grade, and then continued with karate, boxing. And then it was funny because 1976, 74, 75, 78, 80, that's when the full contact karate started coming about. So the boxing was actually really good because most of the fighters had 8 kicks, and they had to get their 8 kicks in, and then right after that it was a slugfest. So I was very fortunate. I really got back into grappling when I moved to California in 1986. I came out here, started training in a bunch of different arts, and then I ended up going to the Jet Center for a private lesson, and I ended up at the Inosanto Academy, and I went there, and I took a Shudo class in 1988. But in 1986, I took a private lesson in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Gracie, and then in 1986 it was Horian. Originally it was Horian, and then it turned to Hoist. And then Hoist would have people come in and fill in when he couldn't do a private. So I would have Higgin Machado. He came in and taught a private. And then a couple years, 3 years after that, I hooked up with Hickson, and I was at his school for about 4 years and getting private lessons. Wow. So that's kind of, I was doing that, and then also training with wrestlers and judokas and sambo guys, just to because it was the introduction. I wasn't really sure. In the time period, it was just best to learn from whoever. Just remember, a lot of guys were grapplers before the Gracies brought in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, before it came famous.
Yeah, that's so the fact that you started the academy CSW, Combat Submission Wrestling. I feel like that's a major component in the martial arts world, like a major player. Sorry, not component, major player in the martial arts world, because the fact that your academy produces people that can finish submissions in an MMA cage that are not necessarily pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys.
Yeah, the MMA that we do it's predominantly a lot of wrestling. That's That's one of the big factors, I believe, that's kind of the missing element is you got a guy that does striking, you get a guy that's good at submission, but how's his wrestling? So the clinch style, getting in off of riding a kick and shooting or catching a kick or slipping off a jab. And a lot of our fighters now are newer generation fighters. They are doing a lot more striking, and they're striking. They have the option to go for the submission. I like that. That's a good option.
Do you think that jiu-jitsu and this traditional Gracie jiu-jitsu is losing its foothold in MMA as the dominant art?
Well, you look at it like obviously Horian started the UFC. I was actually fortunate enough to train with him, and he was nice enough to take me into his house, and he threw everything down on the table, and he said, here's a lot of old paper footage of my father and some of the fighters, the Gracie fighters, when they were fighting the Luta Libre guys, and then a lot of the other people that were doing challenges back then. And he had this idea that they were going to drop a cage onto a platform and then bolt it in. And he showed me a picture of a crane holding up a cage, and they were going to drop it down and bolt it in really quick. And that was the beginning of the cage fight stuff, the octagon.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. Like he was on the, well, he developed it. He started it. He said, I'm going to change the complexion of martial arts throughout the entire world. I'm going to expose Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and how weak the martial arts actually is. And that's why they chose Hoist, who really hadn't fought so much. And they chose Hoist to go in there and fight. Instead of Hickson, it was Hoist because Hoist had not been established yet. And then later Hoyler came in and then Hickson obviously continued in Japan. But Hoist was my first teacher in jiu-jitsu, and he got in there and started fighting in the beginning stages to expose the significance of Gracie jiu-jitsu.
Sure. Now, when building the combat submission wrestling curriculum, what sets CSW apart from its peers in the curriculum building industry?
Well, again, we have a catch wrestling element. So shuto or shoot wrestling is a compilation of striking, throwing, and submission. And we put equal emphasis in each part. And the style that we have it's predominantly kickboxing or boxing mixed with wrestling, mixed with the takedown and then the attacking, the ground and pound, the positioning, and then the submission. Now, a lot of my guys, they do put their gi on and they do jump in jiu-jitsu class. We offer that. And I make sure everyone, if they have a chance, they do it, because that way they can go through the system and get belted and ranked. By the time they're done fighting, they'll have a pretty decent level. And that could be their future when they're done, is they want to start competing in the jiu-jitsu world and competing in tournaments like that. I try to inspire my fighters to get into tournaments when you have some off time, just for some competition experience. But what happened is I had the professional fight team for over 17 years. And then I was on my fourth generational fighter, and I was like, I am teaching twice a day, five to six, sometimes even 7 days a week without a break. And I was doing that for that long. and it was getting to the point where the entire fight team for me, when you have an older generation of fighters, you're always getting guys coming in, but I didn't know if I had it in me to go through my fourth generation of fighters again, to start back in the local events to work up to Bellator and to the UFC. So the team captain, Ben Jones, I actually brought Ben on full time in my spot to take over the fighters, because it's a huge chore. You got 5 days a week and you're training these guys. Ben was a professional fighter, and also he was a professional football player, so he really knows how to command a room. He's got good vocalization, and he's a lot meaner than I am when it comes to running a team. I'm a little bit nicer and more compassionate sometimes. He's super hard, but that's why they love him. It's just a different energy in the room, because you got someone that just runs these guys. He runs them all like athletes, with the amount of conditioning and everything that these guys are doing. So it's good. It's a nice change. They got someone who's 10 years younger, and this time around, I'm teaching and training the night people, all the people that want to learn the technical aspects of catch wrestling, submission wrestling, and also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
That's awesome, man. Now, you mentioned briefly that you encourage your guys to participate in grappling competitions and in, kind of extra scholastic activities that are outside of what you're normally doing, like, outside of MMA. What do you think of the development in recent years of various rule sets within the sport of grappling, like the EBI rule set, the rise in popularity of ADCC, the IBJJF? What are your thoughts on this plethora of opportunities for competitors?
Well, I was part of that, the development, and also promoting the art and the sport. I was traveling all over the United States, all over Canada, Australia, Europe, and I was doing seminars back when a lot of people weren't able to get the information and the knowledge. And my whole goal was to expose the MMA to everybody, so they got to the point where they understood it, knew how to train it, and could develop their own competitors or fighters or athletes. And during that time period, I was also encouraging all the guys, in order to hit all aspects, that they compete in boxing, that they compete in kickboxing or Muay Thai, that they compete in Sambo or wrestling or judo, if they have the ability to do that, and then also to do grappling tournaments. The ADCC, they have all the early tournaments and the qualifiers all over the place, America, Europe, Canada, Australia, and that's how they're finding people. And but I encourage these guys to do these tournaments, IBJJF, the Worlds, all these different things, in order to become a complete competitor. You've got to get used to boxing, you got to get used to kickboxing, you got to get used to just straight grappling, and then submission grappling. Mm-hmm. And it's important that that these guys are getting the experience of just getting in there and competing. Doesn't matter what competition it is, as long as you're putting yourself on the line as a fighter. You have to have a competitive mindset. It's very important.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you 100%. Do you think that there's a problem with having many rule sets within the sport?
No, I think it's better. I didn't like it when you could headbutt on the ground, you could elbow their face in. when there were no gloves and no weight divisions. I thought that was absurd. I mean, it was good in the beginning but someone asked me, hey, what's going to happen? What are these guys going to do for this to become mainstream? And I said, they're going to have to put on gloves, sanction it, and have weight divisions. But that's what happened.
That's interesting, because one thing that you're seeing sometimes in Japan is you're still seeing some of these freak show matches, and they get a lot of fan appeal. You get a lot of,
They do. Japan loves giants. They love now. Now they love a lot of the female fighters, which that was basically forbidden. In the beginning stages of jiu-jitsu, there were never any girls even allowed in practice. There were no girls. Now there's girls all the time, but we went through a time in our gym where we had so many women. We had women fighters, professional fighters, and then all of a sudden we had a lot of girls that just were nurses, beauticians, and they were all doing the kick. It started as cardio kickboxing, then regular kickboxing, and they put the gi on, and then they learned how to do catch wrestling, and next thing you know, you have a bunch of girls that are actually doing it. So the girls are big over there, especially at the higher levels, and then also the big people.
Gotcha. Why do you think catch wrestling is not more important, or not more popular among grappling, the grappling community? Why don't more grapplers?
I'll tell you why. Because there weren't any qualified teachers. It wasn't really handed down, so the grappling that comes from Shudo, it was all catch wrestling. It was all takedowns. It was all ground and pound, and it was all attacks. And the attacking system had to do with approximately 150 submissions. There were 10 combinations in Shudo in catch wrestling, which there are only a handful of people that actually learned all these combinations. And then a lot of these people that are teaching either are just wrestlers changed to a catch wrestler, or they might have had some jiu-jitsu or judo background. Then they said, okay, this is catch wrestling. And I'm looking at it going, there's an actual style to the catch wrestling. And so that's why a lot of people, they couldn't get a high quality coach. You get a guy that learned something off some videos, or that was a descendant of, I don't know, maybe a fighter that had a piece of the puzzle. A lot of people never had like a complete system that actually had tons of submissions, specific set moves that were wrestling based, and also attack sequences and counter sequences, takedown to submission and recounters. Just the emphasis on wrist locks, neck cranks, a lot of the they call the black arts in jiu-jitsu: knee bars, ankle locks, heel hooks, toe holds, pinning. The pinning, if you're a wrestler, that's a good part. But a lot of places, they don't even teach much on the pinning aspect. It's mostly wrestling and submissions.
Gotcha. Do you think that we had last week, we had Joel Bain from Snake Pit USA on here, and we were talking to him a little bit, and we were talking about how some of the techniques that are used by jiu-jitsu competitors are in fact catch wrestling techniques, and how each martial art or each art has its own techniques. Like, let's say I learn, I as a jiu-jitsu, primarily jiu-jitsu guy, or I as a primarily catch wrestling guy, learn a technique from somebody in a different art. And then I teach one of my students, and that student starts doing that technique. Did that student learn a technique in the art that I'm, an expert at, or did they learn it from the third party, if that makes any sense?
Well,
Like,
you get a lot of guys that get their black belts on YouTube. Do you know
yeah,
any of they? I go, wow, that's really cool. Where'd you learn that? They go, oh, YouTube. Yeah, a lot of people. Here's a problem. There's a ton of information on YouTube today, which is great. You can access tons of information, but again, you can't be a keyboard warrior. You got to put your time in. What
yeah,
about all the other stuff, all the conditioning? That's the essence of any high level athlete, is the fact that they're in tip top athletic condition. Their lungs are great, their body's strong, they have a sound, strong mind.
yeah. Now you mentioned also that you've trained extensively with Dan Inosanto, who is a legend in a completely different set of martial arts than what I've gotten to train in. How has your training with Inosanto shaped your style and the style of MMA that you teach at CSW? I was watching a video the other day of you doing a calf slicer using a Kali stick.
Haha, that's funny. Yeah.
Amazing stuff. So tell me a little bit about that, please.
Well, so I trained in a bunch of different martial arts. I got to the Inosanto Academy. The amount of information that Guru Dan teaches in every class, and his teaching style is it makes you think, because there's historical information, there's the actual technique, and then the movement, and then you have to have the conditioning to back it up. You have to be in shape. So he doesn't take so much time in the conditioning aspect for his guys, unless you're doing Thai boxing, because you should be going to a gym doing that on your own. So that's what I was taught, to go out and find different coaches for boxing, for Thai boxing, for Savate, for wrestling, jiu-jitsu, catch wrestling, which is the Shudo. And the whole goal was to be like Leonard Nimoy, in search of the ultimate training partner, and what's the best art for fighting. I think mixed martial arts is exactly what it is. It's mixed martial arts. It's not just, I do have to say there are practitioners that try to keep it as pure as possible. I know Crone Gracie was trying to keep it as pure as possible, just straight jujitsu. But like sometimes, let's say if you don't have a good takedown, or if you can't get someone on the ground, and you don't practice your striking, well, striking has to do with a couple aspects. Number one is offense. Number two is defense. So how's your attacks? How's your strategy, your tactics, your attacks? And then how's your defense? That has to be addressed. You're in MMA. You don't know, like some guys are really good at defending the shot or the takedown, and then you end up on your feet the whole fight. You have to address all the different arts, if you can, or the style. Let's say style. If you can, your objective as a grappler, which I don't understand, why you're getting some of these guys that are experts on the ground, like really great on the ground, and they want to do so much striking. They're going toe to toe, like Jacare, for instance. Jacare, he's really great on the ground, and he chooses half of his fights. He tries to do kickboxing or striking, and I'm like, okay, he's trying to prove himself as an MMA fighter. Like, I could do both, but it's like, if you want to go out there and win, like Damian Maia, couple hits, couple strikes, and bang, they're on the ground. He really utilizes his ability to grapple. But there's some guys out there that are fighting, and it's like they, look at it like this. If you get into a striking match with somebody and your striking is mediocre, you have a 50% chance of winning or losing. That's called a low percentage. So
Yeah.
what's your high percentage? If you're a grappler, why wouldn't it be getting them down to the ground to fight? If you're a great striker, then why wouldn't you learn how to sprawl and stuff everyone's shot and use your head control to defend the takedown and then just light people up? It's because the pressure factor, a lot of people don't understand, but when you spar boxing, when you spar kickboxing, it's sure a lot different than when you spar shoot boxing and when you spar MMA, because MMA is if you make a mistake and you cross center line with your hand or your kick, you got a guy that's going to shoot on you or take your back or whatever. So the pressure factor is a lot different in MMA than it is in just striking.
Interesting. Yeah, that's. I mean, do you think that part of the de-evolution from people focusing on their strengths to going into just trying to stand and bang with somebody when you're a grappler is a result of UFC's marketing and the way that the UFC has really pushed their fighters to focus on crowd pleasing?
Well, yeah, because you want that 50 or whatever, how much it is, $60,000 fight of the night check. And a fight of the night, if you hit the ground and it's just a couple moves and the fight's over, you're not going to get fight of the night. So a lot of guys are forced to start banging a little more, to put on a big show, counter, recounter. I mean, that's the big thing is, you have a guy that's fighting, he's really good, he shoots, and the other guy sprawls, and then suddenly it turns into a slugfest, back to the grappling, back to the ground and pound, and the attacks and positional attacks, reversals, then the ability to get back up to your feet, and then your objective on your feet is to try to carve somebody back up a little bit, carve them up with your elbows or maybe a good knee, and then go back to the ground. And so crowd pleasing is a big factor because, that's a good way. First of all, you also develop a fanfare by being known as an exciting fighter to watch. You want people, regardless if you win or lose, you want people to watch you. A lot of people will watch a fighter because they don't like him. They go, I can't wait to watch this guy lose. And then you get other guys that are huge fans and they're backing you all the way.
Yeah, for sure. Should more MMA fighters be training Kali and the kind of stuff that you're doing with Dan Inosanto that's not necessarily usable, like the specific techniques are not usable in the cage, but they might translate well. Would that help people develop a more complete game?
Okay, look at it like this. You're getting ready to fight in an MMA arena. How's your striking? How's your takedown? How's your ground? So what are you going to do in your training that is going to raise each level of each aspect of fighting? And so in the beginning stages of fight, I mean, if you're an expert boxer and you have no grappling, you have to focus on the grappling arts. If you're maybe a good wrestler, but you're not good at jiu-jitsu or good at submission wrestling, then you have to focus on that aspect. And if you're just a grappler and you have no striking, you have to focus on that. It all needs to be blended up, though. So the sparring has to be punching, kicking, clinching, throwing, takedown. Now, you could spend a lot of time, like, for instance, if you do Kali class regularly, you're wasting, let's say, I don't know, how many hours a week just doing Kali, which is great because it's an unbelievable art. It's so diverse. But is that going to help you in the cage? Is that going to help you in the ring? I mean, it helps your overall athleticism and trains your hand-eye coordination. But if you don't know how to counter a single leg or a double leg or a body lock with a leg trip, you should be spending a little more time on focusing on the things that you don't know, instead of spending, let's say you're let's say you got a fight coming up and you're working on dummy sets, the Wing Chun dummy, you're working on dummy sets, learning the dummy sets and learning going to CLAT class. Well, are you addressing what's going to happen in the cage? That's the biggest factor. And if some of the things in the art that you're doing rolls over, that's great. But what's your main focus? Getting good at striking, either be a counter grappler or an aggressive grappler where you're attacking, or you're a counter fighter. You allow people to try to take you down, and then you're really good at countering people. But what are your arts helping you with that you're training in to get ready for fights?
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of which, I know that you said earlier that you guys have gi class. A lot of jiu-jitsu competitors, a lot of jiu-jitsu instructors insist that in order to kind of reach the black belt level, you need to also train in the gi. And then you got guys that are saying that, you know, if you want to be a no-gi competitor, you should not put a gi on. You should only focus on no-gi. And then you got guys saying that, you know, gi helps your no-gi and vice versa.
I've had arguments with people. I will say, so I was the first guy to take the gi off, and everyone said, why don't you wear a gi? Why don't you go to a gi class? And I go, there's nothing I'm fighting in right now where I'll be wearing any clothing like that. So I'm going to focus on Nogi, which to me was wrestling with submission stuff. That was more of the Nogi style. And then I had arguments with people that were high level black belts that were saying, hey, you're grappling. He said, here's what he said. If you look at all the top grapplers in the world, they all had a gi on and then they took it off. And he was saying that he thought that everyone's level changed when they wore a gi and then took the gi off. But if you, like, let's say you're fighting right now and you have a great grappling class that you don't wear a gi, well, that would be good for you. But it's also good to get supplemental training where you're actually wearing a gi, because first of all, the gi is like a snowmobile suit and it offers a lot more options of choking and manipulating and controlling. And so there's a huge argument. Should you wear a gi? Should you not wear a gi? During my fight career, I wore the gi on and off, but predominantly I did most of my training without a gi on. And then I also said that when I was done fighting, I would put my gi back on because I loved the jiu-jitsu and the judo so much that I really wanted to, you know, get really good and learn all aspects of the gi manipulation. You know, and here's another thing. When I was teaching MMA and straight submission wrestling to my students, they would last from anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 years. I had some guys that were like a little longer term. They were fighters, but the average length of the student was anywhere from 1 to 4 years. As soon as I put a gi on a lot of my guys and let them start doing classes and change the mentality so it was not as aggressive, because the catch wrestling, the Nogi stuff is a little more aggressive, you know, and sometimes that's not so appealing to everybody, you know, so it's harder to teach more people, and it's also harder to retain them, which is a huge factor when you're a gym owner. Is you not just want people walking through your front door, but how long are these guys going to last with you? If your training is completely super hard all the time and you get banged up, a lot of people can't handle that. The gi offers a more friendly atmosphere, and it also offers, you know, you put some cloth between people. It's more appealing for a girl to go into a grappling class where people have gis on, because of the fact they don't have to roll around with a sweaty sweaty grappler that has no cloth, has a rash guard on.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it more appealing to, I believe, to women and also to normal people because of the belt. First of all, you get belted. Second of all, it makes people last longer in your school because of the progression and the length of time that it takes to get through each level. In the submission grappling, people have no idea how long it's going to take you to become a coach or an expert. And, it's like, it's a little bit different. The protocol's a little bit different. And it depends on how it's structured. But the gi makes people last for 10 years as opposed to a person that lasts for, 3 years.
That's a really interesting point. I've actually never heard that before. We got a great comment here from one of the local black belts up in my area. He says, Paulson is a leg lock. Sorry. Paulson is a big reason the leg attack game came to the USA so many years ago. What do you think?
Thank you.
Yeah. What do you think of the recent, and it's really only been maybe like 6 years or so that there's been an explosion of the leg game in competitive grappling. What do you think of that? What do you think is the cause of that? Like, why is it picking up the way it is?
I'll tell you why. Eddie Bravo created the EBI. So I had something, the Erik Paulson Invitational. It was a tournament that was more geared for catch wrestling. Mm-hmm. And that style of attack, you don't get really any points for positioning and just being active and submitting and taking someone down. And so Eddie Bravo started doing that. And when he created the EBI, at first it was all the guys were doing the stuff and trying to really promote his style of grappling, which was the Nogi and the half and rubber guard back take system. And what happened is he started infiltrating and adding, not infiltrating, but he started adding the leg attacks and said, hey, it's perfect for what we do is a lot of the catch wrestling stuff, a little bit of the judo stuff. And these leg attacks work perfect because their legs, they were always intertwining their legs. And so he really promoted the leg attacks. And so I remember like going to the first EBI and then another one and watching, all of a sudden I'm looking going, the styles are changing. Some of these guys are attacking legs now, just like in Japan. So when I was in Japan, that was the style in Japan. It was guys were really good at grappling. It was catch style, but these guys were really good wrestlers and fast submission artists. They had quick kills. They're attacking all different aspects of the body. Some guys were notorious for their chokes, their back takes. Some guys were arm attack experts, and then you had most guys that were excellent at legs. And so Eddie brought that in. And another thing that he brought in, which I really, really thought was great, was the fact that he brought in striking. He brought in the slapping so you could hit somebody while you're doing, the combat jiu-jitsu. I teach a combat jiu-jitsu class in my school where the guys have gis on, so you could throw your guy on the ground. You could hold the gi like a hockey style fight and punch their face. So I put MMA gloves on somebody with a gi and let them go at it a little bit. And what I'm trying to do for my guys is teach them how to deal with somebody that's going to punch your face in on the ground. Because there's a lot of guys that don't know jiu-jitsu very well. They're not good at grappling, and all they want to do is punch your face instead of eat their lunch. And so if you deal with somebody that doesn't give a rat's ass what belt you are or what you know on the ground, they're going to try it. I love to watch all these street fights because you watch the normal tendency in people, and some guys are super tough, and these guys are having a hard time and they pull them on top of themselves and the guys are raining down punches and they usually end with a triangle or a back take to a choke or possibly a mount with the face punches. But I think that's important. I think it's important that you have both aspects, and that when Eddie Bravo changed that amongst all the people that were watching, suddenly the whole style became, hey, let's attack the legs. It's an easier game for people. Like there could be a huge difference in your rank and your level. And guys that are, let's say, they've trained for 6 months, they get good at leg attacks. Suddenly they're catching people who are, purple or brown belts or even black belts because of the fact that they've never addressed the leg locks, or it's a new thing, because a lot of I remember in the beginning stages, they didn't want us attacking legs. They go, jiu-jitsu is not about leg attacks. And today you look at guys and they'll say jiu-jitsu or leg attacks are part of jiu-jitsu. I mean, you look at the epitome. In 2018, I went to the Worlds, and it was funny because before it was always a picture of a girl in a triangle, a guy in a triangle, somebody doing an omoplata, somebody doing an arm bar or a choke. And this year it was a girl knee barring another girl. And that was at the Worlds. And that was the depiction of what jiu-jitsu is today. The girl's in a knee bar. And I was like, knee bars didn't even exist when I started jiu-jitsu. I never saw anyone do a knee bar in any of the classes I ever did. Achilles lock, toe hold, knee bar, heel hook. Now today it's common knowledge. It's completely common knowledge. Now, do you think that the aliens came down and shared the spark of leg locks to everybody? So suddenly it changed the whole consciousness? I'm just kidding. It's not. It came from, again, it was the Japanese, the little catch wrestlers in Japan that were doing that stuff.
So here's the question. Are knee bars now jiu-jitsu, or are they catch wrestling techniques stolen by jiu-jitsu?
It's all part of the game now because they're changing the game. When I was training, I used Shudo has a wrist lock combination attack sequence. It's called combo 6. I think it's combo 6. Combination 6. Wait, is it 4 or 6? It's 6. Combination 6 is all wrist locks. And I remember I got booed. I got yelled at. I've caught people with a head and arm. I've thrown people, and they try to pull their arm out, and their wrist gets stuck in a gooseneck under your armpit, and then they tap out. And even the referee is like, "Hey, what was that?" And I go, "It was a wrist lock." And he's like, "Oh." And it was funny because at that time they were like, "Oh, last resort." And I go, "Huh?" They go, "That's a last resort technique." And I go, "It's submission." I go, "Isn't jiu-jitsu about submission, positioning and submission?" I thought that's what it was, and I don't understand why a lot of the locks were not allowed. Like leg locks. Why weren't they allowed to do leg locks so much? They had the Achilles lock, but why weren't? Because nobody knew them. And I remember someone said, "Hey, could you teach us some leg locks?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then another guy said, this is a while ago, they said, "Hey, could you do a videotape on leg lock defense?" And I go, "Leg lock defense?" They go, "Yeah, because we're going to Japan, or, we're going to compete against these guys that all they do is attack legs. Could you do a video on leg defense, a VHS tape?" That's how long ago it was. And I started laughing. I go, "I don't think so." And they go, "What do you mean?" And I go, "Well, I think it's better that you learn the leg locks in the attack game than me handing you, 10 submissions for an Achilles lock, a heel hook, a knee bar, because now what you're doing is you're not valuing the leg lock. If I teach you just the defense to the leg lock, you're not even going to learn the leg lock, and you're going to have this attitude like you don't need to address the leg lock game. When if you're a fighter, it's total body submission. So you're allowed to wrist lock, you're allowed to neck crank, you're allowed to toe hold and heel hook and knee bar. It's important if you want to present and learn the leg lock game, just to acknowledge it, how to counter it. That's good. It's like anything. How do you get good at countering a double leg?
You'll learn how to do a double leg.
You learn the ins and outs of the double legs. You become an expert at a double leg tackle, because that teaches you how to sprawl. It'll teach you, how to drop your forehead, use your hands to defend, use your forearms to defend, use your hips to defend. And so it's good that you have something that's going to be attacked in your game that you need to learn about. You roll someone and they catch you with something you haven't been caught with or you have never seen, it's going to light a fire in your ass.
Yeah, for sure. That's certainly been my experience, that in order to learn the defense against something, you learn how to attack it, and then you learn how you don't want the other guy to move, and then you move that way if you're caught.
Well, at least, so what it does, it teaches you the ins and outs of the attack. It's so funny because in like 1990, 89, maybe 88, I had experienced only the footlock in jiu-jitsu class. The footlock was a figure 4, and nobody was doing knee bars, nobody was doing toe holds, heel hooks. Nobody knew them. They were even called heel holds. So I remember giving Master Hickson a tape from Japan. I said, "Hey, could you look at this and see if you'd ever be interested to fight over here in this style of fighting? It's very popular. It's very big, and it's going to become very popular all over the world." And so he watched these shoot fighters fight in their early stages of fighting. He goes, "Oh, it's really interesting." He goes, "I see a lot of holes and weaknesses in their game." That was the first thing he said, which to me is actually pretty cool, because here you have a master of jiu-jitsu looking at kind of like how he would fit jiu-jitsu, how he would fight these guys. This is what he's looking at, going, okay, all right, they're weak here, they're weak here, they're weak here. But there's a couple things that I really liked. And I go, like what? And he goes, well, I like the Achilles lock. I liked the way a guy took a guy down off of a kick or a punch, the clinch, out of the clinch. And he goes, but I really like the knee bar. And I go, oh, you do? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's what I really like more than anything. And I said, well, so anyways, I gave him the tape. I went to class that day and he lined everyone up, 30 guys. And he jumped in the middle and he goes, okay, I'm going to roll with all you guys. And he knee barred everybody in class. And every time he knee barred, he'd either look at me or point to me. And I was like, holy crap. Hold on a second. I just gave him that tape. I gave him that tape probably 3 or 4 days ago. So that means he watched the tape, learned one move from that tape that he liked, and he's using it on everybody right now. I mean, how high level of a grappler do you have to be for that? So next thing you know, he knee barred everybody that day, and I could not believe it. And you know what he's told me at the end? He goes, I really like the knee bar. And he goes, you know why? And I go, I'm not quite sure. And he goes, because I'm really good at the arm bar. And the leg is like a big arm. I was like, wow. I mean, how great. The leg is like a big arm, and I'm very good at arm bars. And I was like, wow, okay. That's pretty cool. That was the probably, I'm going to say 1989, 1990.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That is a crazy story.
Well,
yeah.
no, was cool because even Hickson told one of his black belts that he was allowed to trade jiu-jitsu for leg attacks. So a friend of mine who was a black belt under Hickson at the time, he's one of his first black belts. His name was Chris Saunders. Him and I traded. We exchanged leg locks for jiu-jitsu. I'm going to say the trade was not very balanced because I was like a 30, maybe 20, a 20 to 3 ratio. I would show 20 different things and he would show me 3 things. But you know what? It's quality, not quantity. But there's so many different leg attacks, you know, ways to get in, you know, where your legs are, what your primary and secondary objectives are, when to attack the legs, what happens if you fail attacking the legs. And if you're going to attack the legs, you have to be really good at attacking the legs so you don't blow out all your energy or shoot your wad. You know, shoot your wad, that came from the old colonial days when the guys had muskets and you have one shot. So when you're fighting in the one, you just don't want to shoot. You don't want to shoot your gun, you know, senselessly at something that's not even a target. So you have one wad to shoot. So that's where that saying came from. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, don't shoot your wad means you got one shot. It wasn't a sexual implication like it is today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it certainly became one.
Sure, of course.
So, you said that you watched the first few EBIs and that you probably see a lot when it comes to the evolution of competitive grappling. As of the last few years, the real meta in the sport has been leg locks. And one thing I try to ask every one of my expert guests that comes on here is, what do you think is the coming meta? What do you think is going to be the next big thing that everybody's doing that's the craze of the sport?
Oh boy. I think people are going to go back to arm attacks. It's like bell-bottom pants and the fat tie versus the skinny tie. You know, what comes into style suddenly comes in like a hellstorm, and then all of a sudden it disappears as fast as it comes in, and next thing you know, it goes back to full circle. I mean, what are you going to have? Striking? You're going to allow your grappling competitors to strike? I mean, ultimately, your grappling needs to work under a situation where you're pressurized and you got someone that's trying to beat your ass. That's why your ground grappling, you could say jiu-jitsu or whatever style of grappling you have, has to be addressed against a fighter. And that's why the Gracie self-defense system right now is becoming popular again, because a lot of the guys, like when I first started learning jiu-jitsu, it was all self-defense. It was all mostly standing self-defense. And I was like, hey, do you think we could get on the ground? And they're like, yes, but in the beginning stages, you have to learn all the standing defense, the front choke defense, the rear choke, the side choke, the body lock. And so it's funny because now there's a lot of guys that never learned that. So now that's coming back in, and a lot of guys are teaching the self-defense aspect. But you look at, here's another thing. Not everybody in the world wants to be an MMA fighter. Not everyone in the world is going to compete in a grappling tournament. So now you're getting guys that are doing jiu-jitsu. They're doing it for the sport aspect and for the health aspect, but also it has to be the self-defense aspect, because if you have a martial art that you're learning that is not going to save your ass from getting beat up in front of your wife and your kids or your girlfriend, or for you, probably your girlfriends, because you have so many, you know, last thing you want to do is be with one of your 5 girlfriends and not me, but you. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're getting punched in the face on the ground and you're like, hey, I'm a grappler. And then you get jab cross hook and you get knocked out and you're snoring and you end up sucking your thumb. You know, that's not
That's a good answer. I know one thing I've been hearing a lot, and I actually see it in the comments here. We got John Williams saying that he thinks that it's going to be a combination of wrestling and jujitsu. That's an answer that I'm getting from a lot of people, that they think that wrestling is going to be a more important aspect in the years to come here.
Let me say something. So I was very fortunate to have Rico Chiapparelli as he was my wrestling coach. Him and I hooked up in the mid stages of my fight career. I had fought a few times and he saw some of my fights and he said, "Hey, I would like to do a trade with you." And Rico owned the Raw team. He trained Randy Couture, Tom Erickson, Dan Henderson, Vladimir Matyshenko, Frank Trigg, Matt Lindland. He had all these different fighters that were fighting in MMA, and he said, "I'd like to trade with you." And so for me, I was fortunate. I got to go with Dan Gable's top guy and learn how to wrestle in exchange for submission, because a lot of his guys were fighting and didn't know much on the submission. So I was teaching a lot of the catch wrestling to Rico, who passed it on to Randy, to Henderson. I watched a lot of the old Hendo tapes when he was doing submission. I was like, that's 100% Shudo. That's 100% catch wrestling. But in the end, you look at it like this. So catch wrestling calls it a double wrist lock. Shuto calls it a chicken wing. And then you get in the jiu-jitsu guys that say, "Oh, that's a kimura." Well, it doesn't matter. Like, maybe the style's a little bit different, but it's still the same lock. It's still the same lock. How do you address it? Some people's emphasis are a lot more on the kimura, the chicken wing, the double wrist lock. Like catch wrestling, that's one aspect that they love to do. The bread and butter of catch wrestling is what? Is the double wrist lock. Or the double top wrist lock, which is when the arm is turned into a V-lock. So the V-lock is a double top wrist lock. A double wrist lock is a kimura, and a double top wrist lock is, in Japan, they call it urigarami. So you have gaku, you have the standard where your arm is down, elbows high, and then you have the opposite where the elbow's low and the wrist is high. And so those two attacks are more bread and butter for the American style catch wrestler or submission guys, because they're bigger and stronger. That's an easier attack for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's we got a question here from Dakota Hunter. Dakota's asking, what was it like to train in Japan with Billy Robinson?
So I only got to train with Billy Robinson in Japan one time. I went there with Josh Barnett, and Matt Hume was there. And it was during one of Josh's fights. And Josh decided to have dinner with Matt on a Friday. And I said, well, okay, since you guys are going to dinner, I'm just going to go take a class from Billy Robinson at the Snake Pit, because I asked him if he would be there. So we were there on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And I was like, man, I'd really like to train with him, where not when I have a fighter around, but where I'm there to be humble and to sit down quietly and just learn and listen. And so I took 3 trains to get there, and I finally got there, and I was so excited. I go, "Hello, sir. I'm here. It's nice to meet you. I'm really happy to meet you. I'm here to take your class." And then he goes, "Oh, okay." And I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to sit down and listen. And all of a sudden he goes, "Roll with him." And he points to his top guy. He goes, "Roll with him." And I was like, I don't have a problem. That's my favorite thing to do, is just, instead of do technique, I love to just roll all the time. I roll. But it was the technical aspect that these guys had to offer that is what I wanted to learn. I mean, I can roll anytime, anywhere, with anybody, but when are you going to get technique from the submission master himself? So I was so excited, and he made me roll with his guy, and I rolled with him for a half hour. And it was funny because I could not take him down from the, well, I go, where do you want to start? He goes, we'll just start down. And I go, oh, okay, good. So we'll just go straight Nawaz's style, which is attacking on the ground. And he goes, yeah. So we started on our knees, and for 10 minutes, I could not take this guy down. I could not arm drag him, head and arm. I couldn't hit a double or a single. His defense was so good. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Why would I waste 10 minutes and try to get to the grappling? So I finally hit I think I either pulled or dove rolled to my guard, and then I hit a scissor sweep, and boom, I went on top. And then all of a sudden I started attack. And I was attacking over and over and over. And it was so funny because Billy was teaching class, and I would look up to see if he was watching us roll, and out of the corner of his eye, he wouldn't like sit there and blatantly look at us, but out of the corner of his eye, he would peer to watch to see what we were doing. And every time I would attack to try to get a submission, he would watch my attack to see what I knew. And it was funny because when I put this guy on his back and started attacking him, the submissions just started popping out left and right. So Billy got to watch as I was rolling. He got to watch me attack and see what my attacks were. And I was attacking all the different attacks. I was hitting darts chokes, neck cranks, chicken wings, which is the Kimura, the V-locks, which are the Americanas, wrist locks, attacking the legs, the toe holds, the knee bars. And he was watching that I wasn't aware of. He was like pretending like he was watching the guys, but he was like, he would veer over and peek when we weren't looking. And, you know, because when you roll, you're supposed to be focusing on the person you're rolling with, right? Yeah. And so you got a coach that's supposed to be overlooking you. So once in a while you look up to see if they're watching. And every time I would look up, he was never watching. So I was like, huh, okay. But he watched. So in the end, the most valuable thing for me was, I said, we were done with class, and I was kind of sad that I didn't get to learn any technique from him. He was just watching to see what I knew, because I was brought into his academy as a coach for Josh Barnett. So, you know, you're going to look and say, hey, what does this coach know? Because I've met a lot of coaches that are really good coaches, but the amount of technical information they have on grappling is very low. But what happened is I said, hey, is it possible that do you have anything to sell? Could I buy a video from you or a DVD from you? What can I buy? Do you have t-shirts? And he goes, I have a couple books left that I wrote. You can buy a book. And I go, all right, I'll take two of them. I'll take one for me and one for my brother. And I said, you know, anything to help you out. And he goes, thank you. And he goes, I go, would you mind signing it? So he signed my book. And he signed my book to my brother. My brother, Billy Robinson, was my brother's favorite wrestler during, we used to always watch WWE with the Crusher. He used to always go, I really like the Crusher because I kind of look like him. He had blonde hair, and he always smoked a stogie. But my brother loved Billy Robinson because of the fact that he had so many submissions. He goes, look at this guy. He goes, he's got so many moves. And it was the true essence of catch wrestling, but in the big arena. So everyone got to see it, and the transitions and the attacks. And it was pretty cool. But so I asked Billy, I said, hey, do you have any food at home? And he goes, I might have a can of soup somewhere in my cupboard. And I go, all right, that's it. Can I take you out for some ramen, or can we go get some food? I'd like to take you out for dinner. And he's like, yeah, I have some soup at home. That's okay. And I go, well, how about a beer? would you like a beer? And he goes, now you're talking. So next thing you know, one of the best things you could do is give somebody that has that much information a couple beers or even a couple cups of coffee or a Red Bull. And man, the information just poured out. We sat down and just relaxed. I think it was the relaxing. And then I just got to ask some questions that I would never, ever have a chance to ask. And so that was the valuable portion of me taking a class from him, was the fact that I got to go out, take him out for some ramen and some beer, and then listen to his stories. Because to me, that's the best thing. You know, I think the best thing you could ever get from anybody is their time. That's the best present you could get, is, you know, someone's valuable time for them to sit down and talk and tell you stuff, because that information, sharing of information like that, it gets lost. You know, somebody dies and that's gone. And if nobody documents it, you know, it's like, how are you not interested? Are you only learning? Are you only interested in learning techniques from me, or do you want to hear some of the background stories on how things were developed, and who learned from who, and who taught what, and why catch wrestlers are few and far between, and how come there's not that many catch wrestlers anymore? That's a big factor, you know. And one thing I want to say is I cleaned out my garage and I found Billy's book. It was in because I moved, and it was in my pile of books that I had.
Wow.
So I opened it up, and I never had read what he wrote to me. And it said, this is right after he passed away, God rest his soul. He said, to Erik, to the last of one of us, Billy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know how hard to get a compliment like something like that is from somebody that great? To the last of one of us. So he was obviously regarding me as a catch style wrestler for him to say that. And I literally, when I opened the book and I read that, I started crying. And I cried so much that I created a puddle under my feet, and I was cleaning my garage and I slipped and I fell, because it was like a skating rink from all the tears.
Jeez. That is an amazing story, man. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just joking about all the tears, but I was crying. I didn't slip and fall, but
good.
But I did cry because I was like so overwhelmed, like somebody like him would write something like that, and I was overwhelmed to the fact that I held this. It was like this dinner that we had. That was the most valuable aspect of my time with Billy Robinson. You know, a lot of people do seminars and stuff, but just to sit and have a beer with him and ask him, how come catch wrestling is not popular today? What happened to all these great catch wrestlers, all these great carnival wrestlers? What happened? Where'd they go? And he goes, times were tough. He said, times were tough. That's what he said. He goes, times were tough. And he goes, a lot of the guys in the early stages, in the early days, they would get conjunctivitis, which is pink eye, and they would go blind in an eye because there was no cure. We didn't have the silver drops, right? Silver nitrate or whatever you put in your eyes. So if you got pink eye, you might go blind.
Jeez.
If you toothache, and a lot of guys didn't have money to go to a dentist, so they wouldn't have it extracted. Some guys would go crazy because a toothache affects your brain. The infection in your face travels up to your brain. It's true. Look it up. Next thing is impetigo. So we're talking stuff you get from the mat, ringworm, impetigo. He said guys would get impetigo and there was no cure. You put salve on it. And he said, so a lot of the old catch wrestlers, committed suicide.
Jeez.
If they didn't die, because a lot of them were broken, you know, and they never got fixed. There was no knee surgery or shoulder surgery or back surgery. So these guys are getting older. And so a lot of the guys, you know, in their training, they would get pink eye and they go blind, or they get the infected tooth and they start to go crazy. They wouldn't have it fixed, you know, or they would get a skin disease or whatever. And so these guys, like I said, they didn't have much money. Carnival wrestling was a huge factor. So they had to go from carnival to carnival to put food in their mouths, to compete against anyone. And so all these old catch wrestlers were farmers and steel workers. And a lot of these guys, if you look at some of these old pictures, a lot of these guys are so buffed and ripped. You're like, I wonder if these guys took steroids. And this guy's like, no, dummy, that steroids weren't around back then. And I was like, so these guys are just a bunch of steelworking farmers. And these guys, you know what it's like to work really super hard, you know, for very little money. And then, you know, you get into a grappling art and then you get hurt or broken. It's a good way to end your life on that aspect. And so a lot of guys committed suicide, which was a really sad thing for me to hear. I was so surprised to hear that. I couldn't understand it, because I'm like, what happened to all these good guys? And so that's the thing, is like, quit learning off the internet and go out and search out somebody that still has some great information to teach you. Go to a seminar, go to a workshop, do private lessons. You know, these guys just try to access all this stuff just via the internet. It's like, you know, go learn from these people, these pioneers, these people that have so much information that are going to pass it on. They're not going to pass it on just via Skype or you know, you want to actually go and sit down and talk to them and listen to their stories, learn what they have to offer, talk about their training camps, the way they train, their training methods, the people that they train, how you trained them, the ups and downs, you know, stuff like that. That's the valuable stuff. You know, listen to some of the stories of some of these people that did it in the past too. That's how knowledge is passed forward.
Do you think that there's a future for catch wrestling? Do you think that catch wrestling is going to make a stronger comeback in the years to come?
I think that the entire world is flooded with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts now. Wherever you go, there's a lot of black belts. Everyone's like, I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt or this guy. So, you know, when I was training, I remember when the blue belt was a black belt. To see a blue belt, it's like, wow, that guy's like a blue belt. There weren't very many, few and far between. And I remember the first time I saw somebody with a purple belt on, I was so amazed. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a purple belt. That's cool. Never saw a brown belt back then. You know, I'm talking the early 90s, like 91, 90, 91, 92. So now there's such a flood of black belts all throughout the world because jiu-jitsu has become so popular and people have been doing it for you know, however many years, 7 to 10 years, and they're a black belt. And then obviously there's the phenoms that got their black belts quicker because they competed and they understood things a lot more. And here's what I'm thinking is that a lot of these guys are like, oh, okay, so what makes me different than the rest of the black belts? Mm-hmm. So a lot of them are trying to learn the leg lock game. And they're also trying to learn the catch wrestling because it's stuff that not everybody knows about. It's a lot of simple, brutal attacks that a lot of people were never taught. Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know for me, I've been trying to learn a little bit of catch wrestling as much as I can from my coaches. I got I train under Sean Doherty, who fought in UFC 2 and used to train with Ken and Frank Shamrock, and he's in
Wow.
that. He was in that camp.
Pancrase. So that's
yeah. He fought in Pancrase. He fought against. He fought Minoru Suzuki in Pancrase.
He fought who? Suzuki?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Suzuki's one of the originators of Pancrase.
Yeah.
He's old. Suzuki's old school catch wrestler. A lot of like him, Funaki, Asahi from Shudo, Yamada from Shudo, Kawaguchi, Kusayanagi. All these guys, there's a lot of old style catch wrestlers, but it's funny because a lot of the old catch wrestlers today are all putting gis on and they're all becoming black belts in jiu-jitsu also.
What do you think of that? Do you think that's a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's funny because I'll watch some of the jiu-jitsu teachers in Japan, and they're literally teaching catch wrestling with a gi on, and I'm like, you're teaching catch wrestling with your gi. You're not even doing jiu-jitsu. And everyone's like, well, what's jiu-jitsu? Like, okay, well, you gotta say that probably 80% of Brazilian jiu-jitsu is guard work, right? If you go to Brazil, 80% of jiu-jitsu is guard work. And then the other 20% is all the other stuff. And you're taking a lot of these guys and they're not working their guard quite so much. When I first went to Japan, everyone was doing butterfly guard. And I was like, wow, everyone's really good at the butterfly sit-up guard. What's up with that? And they go, it's judo. And everyone is taught that's how you start on the ground. You start either a kami, turtle position, they call kami, or you go butterfly, sit-up guard. Everyone's taught that. And then that helps you transition to the half, the scissor side half, the butterfly half, all the different half guard games. It allows you to go to the tornado guard. It allows you to go to, if you want, the worm guard, the scissor side half guard, the side half guard, the lockdown on the leg. It allows you to do that style, which a lot of guys are already doing, because before Eddie Bravo made the side half guard with the underhook and the lockdown on the leg popular, I learned that in Japan from the judo guys. And I even said, these guys are pulling half guard and they're going side half guard and they're locking my leg down. And I go, so you guys, you do this figure four on the legs. I go, what is that for? And they go, it's to slow your game down so you don't jump through our guards quick. And I was like, huh. And so I was taught in Japan, and also from a Burmese Thai boxing teacher, I was taught the figure four lock as a toe hold from the lockdown from the bottom, and then I was taught how to pass the half guard into the Indian death lock or the kick out to the backspin knee bar or to the toe hold. And so we were addressing the lockdown on the leg, when I first went to Japan in the early 90s, because all the judo guys were doing it. And now, it's weird to see the transition where a lot of guys are jiu-jitsu. When I was there, it was all catch wrestling. There was no jiu-jitsu. And the jiu-jitsu that was there was the old style jiu-jitsu. And so I got accused of teaching the Japanese jiu-jitsu. They're like, think that you're teaching the Japanese jiu-jitsu. And I go, first of all, I'm training here at Hickson's. And I said, why would I go to Japan in a place where I'm fighting, trying to win? And why would I teach them what I'm trying to use on them? Because I was learning Shudo, catch wrestling, and I was learning jiu-jitsu at the same time period. All the guys knew most of the Shudo stuff. They knew most of the attacks. So why would I use those on the fighters? I would use what they don't know, which was jiu-jitsu and transitions and attacks. So I never taught it to them. And the jiu-jitsu back then was basically mastery of 5. It was side control, back control, mount, close guard. This is how long ago it was. And then turtle position or knees, kneeling. Yeah. That was jiu-jitsu that was taught. These guys weren't doing half guard or scissor side half guard. These guys weren't doing Eddie Bravo's rubber guard or the lockdown so much, unless they were judo guys that did the butterfly guard. Now today it's all mixed, and you're looking at some of the old Shudo guys like Inosanto and Asahi, and they all are doing jiu-jitsu also. Yuki Nakai and I both won the belt on the same night in Japan, and Yuki Nakai back then was a Kosen Judo black belt. He had a jiu-jitsu style on the ground, but it was Kosen Judo, which is old style Newaza, Judo Newaza. It's crazy. And he was a catch wrestler. Yeah. Now he's a 5th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. We were both identical at the same time period.
So do you think that there has been, so you mentioned how you don't like people going on YouTube and learning from these videos, and you're not really a big fan of that, but do you think there's been an improvement on the flow of information because of technology?
Yes. I'm not against people learning. I'm just, so what I'm against is someone that again is a keyboard warrior, and all they do is they sit on the internet, and then they just sit and try to learn stuff from there, and they're not spending their time on the mats. That's the big thing. Getting on the mats and rolling and into the chopping blocks where you're actually sitting there and you're going through stuff and you're researching. If you're doing your research and then you're going and trying stuff, then that's how you learn. You dissect things. You learn how to fail at things. You're like, hey, look at this. It's like the side half guard. There's an 8-month period when you're learning the side half guard that you're going to fail at it. Mm-hmm. You're going to fail for 8 months. So you have the patience to fail at something you're learning for 8 months before you start getting good at it? Now, a lot of people don't. Yeah. They want all the information and the moves, but they're not gonna, they're not gonna like to fail for 8 straight months at something.
Do you think that the belt system in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or in martial arts in general is helpful or a good thing? Because I know that in catch wrestling there are no belts. I mean, you learn how to grapple, you get better at grappling, and then that's it. But in Jiu-Jitsu you have these stages. Do you think that that's helpful?
Yes, it helps people retain, and it helps them know where they're at. So in catch wrestling, we had in Shudo, you had advanced, you had student, advanced student, then you had pre-shooter, and then you had the shooters. So this was part of the catch wrestling. So to become a regular student, you had to know 2 combinations. To become the advanced student, you had to know these 2 combinations on the ground. And then the 2 combinations, you had to know takedowns and leg attacks also. So the first combination of submissions was 30 or 28. And the second one was about 8 moves or 12 or 14, depending upon who you learn it from. But you need to learn combo 1, combo 2, which was a lot, but it was approximately 40 to 50 submissions to become an advanced student. So to become a pre-shooter means like an amateur Shudo fighter, you had to know 7 combinations on the ground. 7 combinations, which is approximately 100 techniques. And you were taught striking, takedown, submission, kick catches, all the tie-ups, all the tie-up templates, and throwing templates. From standing, there was 10, and on the ground positioning, there was 14 positions, and then there was 10 combinations, and each combination had anywhere from 3 to 5 techniques to 30 techniques. So approximately, again, 148, 150 submissions. As a shooter, pre-shooter is about 100 submissions, and these guys had to become very accomplished at striking with a takedown and then the ground. You're either an offensive fighter or defensive fighter. So I'm sorry, that was our rank system for Shudo, but was also catch wrestling.
Okay, so it does have a rank system.
What's that?
It does have a rank system then.
Yes, and so that's why I created the CSW curriculum, which was a combo blend of jiu-jitsu, catch wrestling, sambo, and judo in Japanese jiu-jitsu. And what I did is I created 10 levels to the Nogi grappling system. Levels 1 to 5 is for a coach level 1. Levels 6 to 10 is for coach level 2. So look at it like this. Jiu-jitsu fits in the palm of your hand. Those are your first 5 primary positions. So that's what I teach for the first 5 levels, are the first 5 primary positions. The secondary positions is the things that you're not going to start in standard Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is what? Unless you're doing Eddie Bravo's 10th Planet, you're not going to start out. The first thing you're not going to learn is scissor side half guard or side half guard or lockdown or butterfly half guard. Those are secondary positions. You're going to learn side control, mount, back control, close guard. And then later on, when someone gets good and dexterous with their hips and their legs, you start opening the guard and teaching the side half guard, the stretch guard. You start teaching the De La Riva hook system, and then you start teaching all the open guard, the butterfly guard, the feet on the hips, the knees in the chest, the knees in the biceps, one knee in the middle called the split, 1 foot on the bicep, stretch guard. So the secondary positions are knee on belly, shin on belly, north and south. Those are the things that a lot of people don't address.
Yeah.
That's the levels 6 through 10 that I teach.
Gotcha. We got another question from one of the viewers.
Yep.
What's that?
That completes your ground stuff. As far as you take 10 positions, that's pretty good. Plus your takedowns and plus all your wrestling. You add that in there, like your sit-outs, your sprawls, how to take someone off your hips, how to take someone off your biceps, how to take someone off your neck. And then you learn how to do turnovers, how to turn somebody from a turtle, front, side, and back. And then you learn how to do the turtle turn. If someone's in a turtle, good turtle position defense, how to tilt and turn them or put your hooks in and take their back. And then how to pass the open guard. The volley tudo, we used to call it volley tudo guard. How to pass the volley tudo guard, or how to pass the low guard, and how do you pass the high guard.
Gotcha. So we got a question from Pat Gassman.
Yeah.
Pat's asking, what are your main takeaways from training under Yuri Nakamura?
Number 1, Yuri was really strict. So the training that we got from Sensei Yuri was sorry, very Japanese. It was everything was in order. So you had your footwork, your stretching, your calisthenics, a little bit of conditioning, and then you had the Thai pads, then you had the throwing, then you had the ground, and then you had the live sparring. And that was a typical class. What I learned from him, first of all, Yuri Nakamura is by far the most technical ground guy as far as submissions goes, straight submissions. Positioning and attacking. A lot different than jiu-jitsu, which was a lot of transitions and escapes and reversals and how to defend everything. Shudo gave me the attack system.
Okay, good. And then one other question from the comments here. We got Tim Carlisle asking, which MMA fighter today has the best style in your opinion?
John Jones.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Although
his style adapts to everybody. His wrestling, you really don't even know how good his wrestling is because half the time he doesn't have to use it. He does use a lot of JKD striking stuff. If you look at what he does, it's just like, what does John Jones use in his fighting? And I say, pretty much whatever he feels like.
Yeah, John Jones is amazing.
He's gonna attack. He's gonna throw somebody. He's gonna attack him. He's gonna strike. He's gonna do whatever he feels like doing.
Yeah.
Very, very talented.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So we are at about an hour and a half mark here. I'd love to, keep picking your brain forever, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions here in the comment sections of some of these posts. What are some of the, what are some of the things that you're doing right now during the pandemic to keep your mind sharp, keep your body sharp?
I read. If you look at my table, my kitchen table, I have book after book, all these different subjects. But not only that, I'm not just reading. I'm watching a lot of documentaries. I am writing. Every day I'm writing or recording. I have all these ideas of things. Shirt designs. I have some new shirts that I'm making. I have a heavy bag I created, and I'm gonna make an arm attachment that goes on my Motion Master bag. So I'm trying to design that right now. The Motion Master bag was created for movement, and it's probably the best ground bag for movement because it's got little nubs and it's got a head on both ends. And it's one of the best ground and pound workouts you'll ever get. It's 10 minutes only. And this guy, I put a couple at a couple jiu-jitsu schools, and I would go there and sit there and watch. And I would see some of these guys go, man, this bag is so dumb. And I go, oh, why is that bag dumb? And they go, well, look at it. Where's the arms? It needs arms so you can practice your submissions. And I go, that's not what it's for. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I go, it's for movement. It's for your transition. It's your ability to move. And then if you throw some gloves on, you punch the bag. I go, now you got monsters coming out of you. And he goes, well, show me. And so I did all transition movements, knee on belly, helicopters falling off the bag, going north and south and around the world on the bag. And then I started doing striking on it. And the guy goes, wow, you're really good at that. He goes, where did you learn all those drills? And I go, look. And he goes, what? And I go, look at the bag. And he looked at the bag, and I go, look at the name. And it said Erik Paulson, and it said Rev Gear, and he goes, and it said, I think CSW, and he goes, who's that? And I go, he's a friend of mine. I know this guy pretty well, and he created the bag, and he showed me a lot of these movements. He's got a ton of different movements from all these different ground arts, which is all the knee on belly and the shuffle, and then he goes into the judo and all the different positions with the hip heist drill, and then switching to Kata, reverse Kata. And I go, the striking is ground and pound is from MMA. And I go, and he goes, so he taught you a bunch of that stuff? And I go, yeah, I did some classes with him and some private lessons, and he showed me a bunch of the striking and the movement on that bag. And he goes, well, that bag's so stupid, it needs arms. Tell him it needs arms. And I go, I will. I'll tell him that later when I see him. So later on, I went in the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, hey, you need to develop some arms for that bag. And I said, okay, I will. So that's what I was working on.
So, yeah. Do you think that people should be doing more dummy training?
If you have one, yeah, definitely, because it's your movement. I'm watching everyone's posting videos on how to create your own grappling bag.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. They're taking their gis and they're tying them, they're stuffing them full of clothes and they're tying the ends and that's their grappling dummy.
I like what I think I don't know if I don't know if if you know him, Jordan Peitzman in the Midwest somewhere. I think he's trained CSW. I'm not sure if he still does.
I don't. Where's he train at?
I think he's in Idaho or Iowa, but one of the I states. And what he's been doing is he's been using a chair.
Oh yeah. The chair is actually very useful because you do your guard passing stuff, but there's nothing like having a dummy where you can lay on it. You know, you can move it around and you could throw it and foot sweep it and hip toss it and you could punch it. You know, can I say something? The ground, the Motion Master was completely developed for times like this. When you're pent and cooped up in your house and you have frustrations, it was created. Monsters come out of you when you start grappling on a bag and you start hitting it. All your frustrations. I remember when I first created the bag, I was in New York and I said, okay, I have a bunch of drills for this heavy bag. I'm going to teach in this seminar as a workshop. I was assistant Guru Dan and I got to teach a workshop and I said, watch this. I've got a new idea. And this was in 1989, 88, 89, 90. And this guy goes, well, what are you going to do? And I go, watch this. And I go, I have all these movements on the ground. And I go, so we're going to demonstrate on a bag. So I pulled out a heavy bag. I taped the chains so they wouldn't punch the chains. I put it on the ground and we did all these drills. And I made all these drills up. They were based on the infinity symbol or emblem, which is what? Perpetual motion. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I go, watch this. And I put the girls on it. And I go, all right, we're going to start slugging. Ready? And I watch these housewives. I watch monsters come out of these girls. And I go, this is it. This is the secret. There's nothing like putting your weight or your knee on a ground bag and just punching the face in of the ground bag. And the monsters are flying out of these people. And you could just see frustration and anger and fear and everything just coming out of people. And I was like, man, this is perfect because you get tired because of anaerobic. You get tired quick. This is a 10-minute workout. It's 2 minutes of movement, 3 minutes of striking. Then it goes 2 minutes of striking, 3 minutes of movement, and you're done. That's it. So that ground bag helps your frustrations come out. That's the best thing about it.
Awesome. Well, Erik, we are about out of time for today. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to share? Any thoughts you wanted to share with anybody still watching?
One of the biggest things of getting good is obviously if you're up and coming, take your classes, go with a lot of different people, roll. Don't just start on the ground, start on your feet, but don't waste all your time on your feet. Give yourself a time limit when you start on your feet that you're on the ground. Because a lot of guys get stuck. You know, I've been to some jiu-jitsu tournaments and I watch these black belts and the entire match was them on their feet trying to get a takedown. And nobody wanted to go on the ground. So that was the end of the match. And I was like, that's it? I was so disheartened. Like, how are you not forcing these guys to hit the ground? So when you're working your takedowns, it's good. It's important. You have one or two good takedowns. Get on the ground and get your movement moving. And also your transitions for getting back up. It's not about just getting somebody down. It's also when you're down, how to get back up to your feet. And that's a self-defense aspect. I will tell you the best 3 things for self-defense is the wall survival drill, which is the punching versus the hand defense. It's called the wall survival drill. The second thing is hand fighting. Hand fighting comes from wrestling. and you're trying to grab your partner, trying to get a hold on a collar tie, a bicep tie, an elbow tie, a wrist tie, a body lock, an arm drag, a duck under, a spin. And then the third thing is your seal control drill, when you're putting someone on your back and you're just defending and not letting them get their hooks in. And if they get a hook in, you take their hook out, taking the hooks out. So you got wall survival, hand fighting, and seal control drill. Those are the three great things that I like to do for self-defense.
Awesome.
The wall survival also could go on the ground, and you can have people punch your face on the ground. And the reason you teach the ground survival as the wall survival when someone's striking is so you don't lose your composure. Because a lot of guys, when they get hit, they lose their composure. And they go into what we call oh shit land. And you go, oh shit. And suddenly you're like, you're a shell of yourself and you have no scruples. You lose your thought process because you're getting punched and you're freaking out because you're not used to getting punched. So the more you get punched in the face and work your defense, I think the better you become, because you're more confident knowing that, first of all, you're not most of the time not going to get really hurt from a punch or from a kick. And secondly, it trains your eyes to see. So if you value the way your face looks, you learn how to defend against it, against all the punches and all the elbows, headbutts, and knees.
Yeah, that's great information. Do you have any product that you wanted to promote? Anything that you have coming out in the near future, or any sponsors you want to shout out to?
I'm doing a pop-up store in a week for a couple of the t-shirts, the older t-shirts that I had. And the reason I'm doing it is just the pop-up store is just to create a little bit of income due to the fact that we've been closed for 3 months. Here's another thing. This is kind of a time to reset and time for you to spend some quality time with your family and the people that you love. And it's important because it's teaching people how to you're living with them. So cohabitation, and also to talk about things that are interesting and not just sit around on your phone all the time and be completely 100% enamored with your phone. The worst thing is watching 3 or 4 young guys and they're all sitting at a table or on a couch and each one of them are on their cell phone and not one of them are having face-to-face conversations. Now's the time to set your phones down and to talk and to share knowledge and love and stories and information and try to really figure out, what's really valuable in your life right now. What's important? How is this going to change your life? How is this coronavirus going to change your life? How's it? You're stuck in a house right now. Is it going to teach you to start hustling when you're done, to try to create another income? You should try to create at least 4 to 5 avenues of income if you can. 4 or 5 streams of income. The second thing is going to teach you to stay in contact with people and to be nice to people, because we're all going through the same problems. Everyone's going through hardship right now. Some people are having it harder than others. Some people are having psychological issues. The suicide rate has gone up 5 times than normal. And so you've got people that they're not quite sure. Now's the time to get out in the grass and meditate. Put your feet in the grass, meditate. Just to let you know, prayers do work, and it's positive energy. They create positive energy, and the positive energy creates a circle. And what happens is, by your meditation and your mindset, you're aligning with earth and sky, and you're opening your heart, and you're learning how to breathe and then how to cope and deal with hardship right now. So it's teaching you how to maybe go inside and get strong and then share that with other people.
Can people who want to buy your merchandise find any of that stuff online? Do you have a website?
Yeah, ericpaulson.com. I've got an association where we give away 4 to 5 free camps a year, and it's all for testing and information for rank. And we have 5 things that we teach as a curriculum. We have the Nogi grappling levels 1 to 10, 1 to 5, and 5 to 10. We also teach the STX kickboxing, which is mixed with the shoot boxing, which is punching, kicking, and throwing. And then we have an MMA program. Also, we have the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, which is all part of the 4 to 5 aspects of the CSW, which is Nogi grappling, gi grappling, MMA, and kickboxing. I'm also working on, which will be out shortly for download. It's called Combat Athletics, and it's all body weight exercises and gymnastics training to assist you with your martial arts. Because we're athletes, so one of the best forms of athletics is gymnastics, because it helps you learn how to control your whole body. And me coming from a gymnastics background, that's one thing that I haven't quite seen in the martial arts yet. I know GSP was doing it, and I also hired a gymnastics coach for all my professional fighters. My entire team of fighters all had to learn gymnastics.
Mm-hmm.
Front roll, back extension, front handspring, front head spring, back handspring, front flips, back flips, cartwheels, aerials, round offs. And there's a lot you could do, like the conditioning. The aspect that I really wanted everyone to see was the conditioning. How a gymnast is so strong is because of the conditioning that they use on each piece of equipment, which are about 5 different pieces of equipment. And so I filmed a conditioning program based on 5 pieces of gymnastics equipment that you could incorporate into your grappling or your martial arts to help you become a better athlete.
Okay.
And it's combat athletics. That's what it is.
Combat athletics. You're not the first person I've heard talk about the importance of gymnastics for martial artists.
Gymnastics natural. I remember when I was at the UFC, I saw Hickson and all the black belts. They had a secret training session with a guy that was teaching the gymnastics natural. Do you remember him?
You're talking about Alvaro Romano?
Yeah, he was teaching Hickson and all the black belts. He was teaching them all the movements, and it was cool because it was all animal movements, like the tiger and the snake, and he had all these different movements that he was teaching these guys. The monkey, the gorilla, the silverback. It was pretty cool. The shrimp, and I got to watch Hickson and I think Hoist and Hoyler and a bunch of the black belts. I just got to peek in really quick before I was kicked out of the room, and I got to watch them do all the warm-ups and the breathing from the gymnastics natural guys. And I thought, that's really cool. I would really like to do that because I was a gymnast, and it's a different style. It's more like based off the animals in the Amazon or in the jungle. And so what I did is when I came back, I created something I call dry swimming, which are all the crab walks, the monkey, the snake, the shrimp, and they're all the movements on the ground that you'll use that will help your overall grappling. And it was mixed with the dive rolls and the back extensions and a lot of the gymnastics ground stuff.
It is amazing how similar some of those drills look to swimming. Like shrimping looks like a swimming stroke.
Yep. Well, and that's funny because when I tore my psoas off the bottom of my pubic bone, and I did not have a guard for 3 years because I let somebody open my guard without defending, and he's like, man, I can't open your legs. It's amazing. And I go, thank you. I go, yeah, it's all in your head. And he goes, really? I go, yeah, you try it. So I went in his guard and I tried to open his guard. I go, don't let me open your guard, but don't defend with your hands. And we both, my friend was in Australia, and I remember getting home. He goes, hey, you hurt me. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, you hurt my pubic bone. He goes, my hip flexor or something popped. And it was weird because a week later I rolled with the guy. I opened my guard, my hip popped. And it wasn't my hip. It was our psoas. We tore our psoas off of our pubic bone. We both did. Because we were doing this stupid ass drill that I thought was smart. You know, because I used to do that to everybody. They tried to open my guard, and I would keep bringing them up. I would cross my feet, straighten my legs, and pop them up left, pop them up right. And they're like, wow, your guard's really hard to open. And so I let him push on my legs, thinking I was smart, and it actually tore my psoas from my pubic bone. And they told me to go to Australia or Canada, and they would give me steroid injections in my hips. It was a footballer's injury. A lot of soccer players had the same type of injury, so I had to go to a specialist doctor to heal from it. And it's so funny because they said, I go, well, what's my option? They go get steroid injections every week for a month. And I go, well, I can't fly to Canada every week to get a steroid injection on my hip. And they go, well, then let it heal naturally. And I go, how long is that going to take? And they go, 3 years.
Jeez.
So in 3 years, I had to modify, in order for me to grapple, I had to modify it and change my game. And that's what jiu-jitsu is. Look at the scissor side half guard. Professor Gordeau had a bad knee, and he wanted to continue to grapple. So what he did is he created the side half guard. He put his bad leg on the floor sideways and his good leg on top, and he would start grappling. And he created an entire sweep system. And that's where the scissor side, the entire half guard came from. Was made pretty popular by Professor Gordeau.
You know, it's not the first time I've heard about systems being developed around injuries. It's crazy. Yeah.
You know, Greg Nelson teaches. He teaches people that are amputees. He's got a couple guys that got maybe lost a limb in war, so he taught a form of figure 4 backpack on a person with the arm control. It was just because the guy, he lost his legs. So he would teach a upper body hook control, which is really interesting. It's like a backpack. It's called the amputee. He calls it the amputee, which he calls it that because it was used to teach a guy who lost his legs.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I always am fascinated when people with severe limitations learn how to grapple and they have to find a way around the limitation.
Well, you know what you do? You focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. And we had a guy at Hickson School, I remember, and also a guy at Machado's later on that was blind. He was completely blind, but he was grappling blind. And I have a student and a friend. His name is Joe Murphy. And Joe Murphy, he's blind. So he still grapples all the time. And it's just proof you don't need your eyes to grapple. All you need is touch. Once you touch somebody, boom, it's on. And you could feel the energy. That's why it's fun sometimes to grapple with blindfolds on or grapple in the dark. Have you ever grappled in the dark?
I have not. I've grappled with my eyes closed.
Well, it's kind of weird because if somebody walks in and turns the lights on and finds you on the ground grappling, they're like, hey, what are you doing? And then you go, Erik Paulson told me to grapple in the dark. Yeah, sure he did. I would tell you that. Anyways, Rev Gear. Yeah, Rev Gear is one of my sponsors. I love their equipment. I've helped them to develop their stuff throughout the years. The boxing, the MMA, the kickboxing, different bags, shin guards, boxing gloves, MMA gloves, and also the ground and pound bag and the ground grappling bag. That's all available there. They have and they're offering huge sales right now. I think they offered a 60% off sale for all the people that they could, get some equipment to train with during this downtime.
It's an amazing deal. So for anybody still watching or anybody that's tuning in, just wanted to update you guys with my schedule for this week. Tomorrow, Monday, I have Josh Starlord Leduc. Tuesday, I have Ozomatli's own Ulysses Bella. Ozomatli is a Grammy-winning Latin fusion band. Very interesting guy. Wednesday, we've got David Aguzzi, who owns Grappling Industries. Thursday, I've got elite female grappler Nikki Sullivan. Friday, I've got one of your teammates, Erik, Lance King. Lance King is the owner of Nightmare Records. He is a world-class singer, and he is one of Greg Nelson's Muay Thai coaches at his gym.
I know Lance. Lance came out and trained with Brock Lesnar. He came out and trained with Brock, and I think he was doing a lot of boxing back then. But yeah, he's a great guy.
I love Lance.
Yeah, well, the Midwest guys got a lot of funny stories, and I think it's funny because when you meet a Minnesotan, you just, as soon as you meet him, you go and you start counting, and you count how many seconds it's going to take before a joke comes out. Because
it feels like jokes.
Well, it's the Swedish, Norwegian, German backing, and I think, telling a joke is always like the Uli and Sven jokes. You know the Uli and Sven jokes?
I don't.
Uli and Sven were out in the woods hunting, and Uli came through the woods. He goes, "Hey, I'm going to put a deer hide over my body to try to sneak up on the deer and chase him to you, Sven." So he goes out there and he chases this deer, and the deer comes up and he shoots it. And then Uli goes, Sven, he goes, "It was me. You just shot me." And he goes, "Oh, crap." So he rushed him to the hospital, and he got him to the doctor, and he goes, "Doc, is he going to live? Is he going to live?" And he goes, "He would have lived if you would have gutted him first." Because like when you shoot a deer, they have to dress them and they have to remove all the guts so they don't spoil.
Yeah.
Not good for vegans or vegetarians, but for those carnivores out there, or just so you understand, when they slaughter, which is a bad word, but when they slaughter a deer, you have to remove the guts so it doesn't spoil, so the meat doesn't spoil. Isn't that funny?
That's a good joke.
Thank you. I didn't make it up. Everyone has an Uli and Sven joke.
I've never heard of that before. I'm from Cleveland, which I guess is the easternmost part of the Midwest. So it's I don't have access to the same kind of humor.
Come on, you guys. You're in the Midwest. There's a lot of humor there. There's a lot of. Do you guys have Bigfoot there? And do you ever witness or meet anyone that sees that stuff? Or it's so funny. I met a guy from Ohio, and also Arkansas, and they were talking about all the Bigfoot sightings that they have. And I was like, it was so funny because I didn't bring it up. They just started talking about stuff, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting."
That's odd.
If you camp a lot or if you're out in the woods, what are your odds of seeing some strange things?
They're decent.
And I love to camp. I love to go outside. And have you ever been to Yosemite? You should go to Yosemite sometime. You ever go to Yellowstone Park?
Not yet. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah. So some of these places, what's the place with the huge, it looks like a tree, but it's a mountain. Where's that? Is that New Mexico?
Flagstaff? Is that Flagstaff?
No, it's got the huge rock, flat mesa on top, and they say it holds. It looks like an old tree stump that's huge.
Is it that's in Australia?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm.
What's that? Oh, Erik seems to have been frozen here. I think that hold on, let me see. Well, so that's unfortunate. Yeah, so we got the schedule. Tomorrow's Josh Leduc. You know, and if you guys stay tuned, I will be posting each day who's coming on. Next Saturday, which is the last one that I didn't mention, was Silver Fox. He's coming on next Saturday. Hopefully, I can have Erik back on here at some point. Very interesting man, great stories. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and tune in next time for the BCTL podcast.